Hey everybody, January 9th, we're going to talk about some of the things that we encountered in the daily Bible reading. I am looking at the Chronological Life Application Study Bible Notes from Logos, and that's what's on the screen. And we're not going to read all of these. I love to talk about Esau and the red soup simply because we joke about the lentils, which I talked about in the daily Bible reading itself. But I thought this was interesting how it was put in the life application study notes. And it says from that story, Esau traded the lasting benefits of his birthright for the immediate pleasure of food. He acted on impulse, satisfying his immediate desires without pausing to consider the long range consequences of what he was about to do. We can fall into the same trap. When we see something that we want, our first impulse is to get it. At first, we feel intensely satisfied and sometimes even powerful because we have obtained what we set out to get. But immediate pleasure often loses sight of the future. We can avoid making Esau's mistake by comparing the short term satisfaction with its long range consequences before we act. Esau exaggerated his hunger. "I'm dying of starvation," he said. This thought made his choice much easier because if he died of starvation, what good was an inheritance anyway? The pressure of the moment distorted his perspective and made his decision seem urgent. We often experience similar pressures. For example, when we feel sexual pressure, a marriage vow may seem unimportant. Or we might feel such great pressure in one area that nothing else seems to matter and we lose our perspective. Getting through that short, pressure filled moment is often the most difficult part of overcoming a temptation. And that would be a temptation to sin, right? Um, Food has always been something that I have dealt with. You know, I believe this is probably a little bit of an oversimplification, but anything, whether it's food, whether it's alcohol, whether it's money, whatever whatever takes whatever you think of before you think of God, whatever you think of more than you think of God, whatever matters more to you than God matters, that's a sin for you. That's a stumbling block for you. Food has always been a stumbling block for me. I have to pray over it and fight it. And, you know, because food, it, the Bible calls gluttony a sin. So, if we're overweight, if we eat more than we need to eat, um, then food can be a sin. But yet we need food, right? We need food to live. And so there's a lot of stuff like that can become too important to us. And you know, food smells good, it tastes good, it looks good. I've also heard somebody talk about the fact that sin almost always starts with vision. You see something and um and the desire begins. Um and I think there's a lot of truth to that when we really dig down into it. But this makes us think about what decisions are we making right now and how are they going to affect the rest of our life, the rest of our family's lives. Um, you know, a relationship with food is something that often gets passed down in families, right? Because grandma cooked it this way, or my mama made it this way, or grandma told me that I have to clean my plate, or Anyway, it's just stuff that we need to think about, and we need to think about our relationship with it versus our relationship with God. So there was some other stuff in this that was interesting. They go into Esau. In Hebrew, Esau's name means hairy. And during his life, Esau made some choices he must have regretted bitterly. At times, he seemed to find it harder to consider consequences, acting on the need or desire of the moment without counting the cost. The famous example of this was when he traded his birthright for a bowl of stew. We've been talking about that. He also chose pagan wives in direct opposition to his parents' wishes. Can you think of times when you put the welfare of your family, your spouse, your integrity, your body, or your soul at risk in order to fulfill a need that was actually just a strong desire? Do you sometimes feel that the most important parts of life escaped while you were reaching for something else? If so, your initial response, like Esau's, may be deep anger. In itself, anger isn't wrong as long as we direct the energy of our anger toward a solution and not toward ourselves or others as the cause of the problem. Our greatest need is to find a focal point other than what I need right now. That will keep our lives in perspective. God is the only focal point that will never lead us astray. A relationship with Him will not only give an ultimate purpose to your life, it will also provide hope and guidance for wise living. So, Esau's strengths and accomplishments: he was the ancestor of the Edomites. He was known for his hunting prowess and archery skill, and he was able to forgive after explosive anger. Esau's weaknesses and mistakes: he tended to choose according to immediate needs or desires rather than long range consequences when faced with important decisions. And he upset his parents by poor marriage choices. Lessons from Esau's life: God allows certain events in our lives to accomplish His overall purposes, but we are still responsible for our actions. Consequences are important to consider. He's from Canaan. He's a skillful hunter. His relatives, his parents are Isaac and Rebekah. His brother is Jacob. His wives are Judith, Basemath, and Mahalath. And the key verse in the Esau thing is Esau pleaded, "But do you have only one blessing? Oh, my father, bless me too." And then Esau broke down and wept. Esau's story is told in Genesis 25 through 36. He is also mentioned in Malachi 1, 2 through 3, Romans 9:13, and Hebrews 12:16 through 17. It's kind of interesting to figure out um, the other places that some of the big names of the Bible stories are mentioned. Um, we talked about the Philistines in this, and let's go back a little bit. The Philistines, Genesis 26:1, the Philistines would become some of Israel's fiercest enemies. The Philistines were one group of a number of migrating sea peoples from the Aegean Sea who had settled in Palestine. They arrived by way of Crete and Cyprus and were used as mercenaries by Canaanite rulers. These people lived along the southwest coast. They were few but ferocious in battle. Although friendly to Isaac, this small group was the forerunner of the nation that would plague Israel during the time of Joshua, the Judges, and David. This king Abimelech was not the same Abimelech that Abraham encountered in Genesis 20 and 21. The thought is that Abimelech may have been a dynastic name of the Philistine rulers, kind of like the name Pharaoh. Um, We see Isaac repeating things that his father did. He lied that his wife was his sister. Um, you know, parents shape the future of their children by what we do. So we have to make good choices in front of our children so that they will make good choices. So, it tells us, what kind of example are you setting for your children? Sometimes I think, ouch, whenever I think about that question. Um, God kept his promise to bless Isaac. The neighboring Philistines grew jealous because everything Isaac did seemed to go right. And uh, this is good on jealousy. So they filled his wells with dirt and tried to get rid of him. Jealousy is a dividing force strong enough to tear apart the mightiest of nations or the closest of friends. It forces you to separate yourself from what you were longing for in the first place. When you find yourself becoming jealous of others, try thanking God for their good fortune. Before striking out in anger, consider what you could lose: a friend, a job, a spouse. Jealousy is very dangerous. It talks about water being very precious. Um, you know, Throughout the Bible, we hear them talk about the wells and digging the wells and going to the well. And Beersheba is a town in the southernmost part of the Promised Land. It's 28 miles southwest of Hebron. It was important from the earliest times in Israel's history. Hagar wandered with Ishmael in this area in Genesis 21, and later Isaac in Genesis 26, and Jacob in Genesis 46, 1 through 5. Both had significant spiritual experiences there, and it was important in the lives of numerous other Hebrews. Beersheba was considered to be the extreme south of the land, and the phrase "from Dan to Beersheba" became a common way to refer to all of Israel. Ancient Beersheba was located at Tel Beersheba, 2 miles northeast of the modern city. Recent excavations revealed that the city was founded by the Hebrews in the 12th or 11th century BC, and probably was the place where the sons of Samuel judged the people. So Rebecca heard Isaac tell Esau, to go and kill him some food and bring him his favorite food. And Rebecca, knowing that all the way back while she was pregnant, that God had already told her that Jacob would become the family leader, Rebecca took matters into her own hands. She resorted to doing something wrong to try to bring about what God had already said would happen. How many times have we tried to help God do something that he said was going to happen? We kind of fall into that trap sometimes, don't we? Um, how we react to a moral dilemma often exposes our real motives. Frequently, we are more worried about getting caught than about doing what is right. Jacob did not express concern about the deceitfulness of his mother's plan. He only expressed his fear of the consequences if he was caught. If you are worried about getting caught, you are probably in a position that is less than honest. Let your fear of getting caught be a warning to do right. Jacob hesitated when he heard Rebekah's deceitful plan, although he questioned it for the wrong reason. He protested and thus gave her one last chance to reconsider, but Rebekah had become so wrapped up in her plan that she no longer saw clearly what she was doing. Sin distorts people's vision and degrades their character. Correcting yourself in the middle of doing wrong may bring hurt and disappointment, but it also will bring freedom from sin's control. So let's take a look at Jacob real quick, and then we'll be done with today. Jacob in Hebrew, Jacob's name is pronounced Yaakov, which is derived from the Hebrew word for heel. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are among the most significant people in the Old Testament. They were not perfect heroes. Like us, they were trying to please God, but often fell short. Each was capable of deceit and selfishness, and yet God kept his promises to them. Jacob was the third link in God's plan to start a nation from Abraham, as God had announced his promise would be fulfilled through Jacob and not his twin brother Esau. Jacob's life had 4 stages, each marked by a personal encounter with God. In the first stage, Jacob lived up to his name, first by grabbing Esau's heel at birth, and then later by grabbing his brother's birthright and blessing, which led to his flight from his homeland. It was during his flight that God first appeared to him. Not only did God confirm to Jacob his blessing, but he also awakened in Jacob a personal knowledge of God. In the second stage, during his extended time with Laban, Jacob experienced what it's like to be on the receiving end of deception by someone in his family. The Jacob of stage 2 showed admirable skill, determination, restraint, and patience. He waited for God's permission to separate from Laban, who was clearly taking unfair advantage of him. In the third stage, Jacob grabbed onto God. He realized his dependence on the God who had continued to bless him. By the Jordan River, he took hold of God and wouldn't let go. After an all-night wrestling match, God changed Jacob's name to Israel, meaning he struggles with God, or God fights. Finally, Jacob's last stage of life was to be grabbed in a good way by God, who would from that time forward hold on to him and fight for him. Which Jacob are you most like? The young Jacob, whom God tracked down in the desert of his own plans and mistakes? The Jacob who worked hard for what he wanted and patiently endured ill treatment? Or are you more like the older Jacob, who presented his desires and plans to God for approval before taking action? Do you wrestle with God for his blessing as you study his word? Do you look to him in faith to fight for you? Jacob's strengths and accomplishments. He was the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. He was determined and willing to work long and hard for what he wanted. Jacob became a better man by trusting God through years of unfair treatment by Laban. Jacob's weaknesses and mistakes. He resorted to unscrupulous measures rather than going to God for help in the matter of Isaac's blessing. Though he questioned his mother's plan for deceiving his father, he chose to go along with it. Jacob's lessons from his life. Our failings and mistakes will never wipe out God's good promises to us. If we are receiving unfair treatment, we can ask God to use it for our glory, for our good, and for his glory, for God's glory. The vital statistics. Where? Canaan. Occupation, he was a shepherd and a livestock owner. His relatives, his parents were Isaac and Rebekah, his brother Esau, his father-in-law Laban, his wives Rachel and Leah, his offspring, 12 sons and 1 daughter are mentioned in the Bible. The key verse, what's more, I am with you, and I will protect you wherever you go. One day I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have finished giving you everything I have promised you. Genesis 28:15. So Jacob's story is told in Genesis chapters 25 through 50. He is also mentioned in Hosea chapter 12, Matthew chapter 22, Acts chapter 7, Romans chapter 9, Hebrews 11. And that's all we're going to talk about today, because a lot of this story about Jacob we haven't read yet. We'll be reading tomorrow and possibly the day after. So thanks for joining in on the Digging Deep